Cities are brands, and your city wears a brand regardless of whether you know it or not. Like all the brands you'll see here, your city is a brand, and it has to present its brand in competition with the other cities in the world. We're going to discuss how your city's brand can be enhanced, developed, and organized. Okay, I'm here with Double Bay talking about branding, and Double Bay already has a brand. Double Bay, Double Pay, you know, everybody wears a brand. I wear a brand, you wear a brand. But cities haven't been on branding, really. Branding's been something the private sector does. Coke, Pepsi-Cola, and so forth. So I'm with three people who can talk about branding in a very special way. First, Greg, you are?
I'm, for my sins, the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce of Double Bay.
Catherine?
I'm on Woollahra Council.
And David?
And my name's David Folkes, and I'm the Managing Director of Generation Alliance, which is a branding company.
All right, so now that we know who we are and our brands are straight, let's talk a little bit about how Double Bay, which is in Woollahra, which is in Sydney, for those people who don't know, kind of a suburb of Sydney, which was an inclusive suburb. It had a real strong reputation. Greg, as a chamber, why did you guys get involved in this branding?
Well, it was Double Bay for the last 30, 40 years has been or was known as one of the primary focal points of fashion for the city of Sydney, and the village of Double Bay had that reputation of having all the latest trendy, upmarket, a lot of fabulous restaurants, etc. We then, about 10 years ago, got hit by the perfect storm. We got the GFC, we had a huge shopping centre open very closely to us, we lost our cinemas, and metered car parking came in, all in a very short space of time. And Double Bay really fell off the map, and in fact in your introduction you mentioned Double Bay, Double Pay, and that's an image that was left permeating through Sydney, that Double Bay was Double Pay. About 6 or 7 years ago, we were getting down to 27% vacancy factor. The place had tumbleweeds going down. We were in trouble, and so to start the rejuvenation, to try and kickstart the village, we needed a new image, and so that's
so you need a new image. And Catherine, you're in the city council. Mm-hmm. The city councils usually figure their image is tax roll. So why did you guys get involved in all this?
Well, I think one of the key things is that Double Bay is both a social and an economic hub of our area, and we identified that that was important. What we can do as council is often all the urban planning outcomes, better roads, better pavements, compliance about building, those sorts of things, but they don't really matter until you create a sense of place. So what we decided to do is partner with Greg and the Chamber of Commerce to actually have a collaborative approach to make sure we actually create a great place to come, to stay and do a range of things, but also tell your friends about it so it could actually start to build it back to how
so
it used
branding's all about communication, so that's a nice segue to you, David, because brands attract customers. Mm-hmm. And so how do you do this, David? And when do you start this? How do you get involved in it? And how do you get cities involved in it?
Well, we only get involved in it through the invitation of people like Greg and Catherine, really, because what we need is a level of leadership that's pre-existing in the community that wants to actually create some change in that community, and we would then typically get involved to help facilitate the various conversations with different stakeholders, and to determine what we help to create as like the distinct notable attributes, the DNA of a place.
Well, no, this is something that's, maybe, did this come from the commercial side? How do you get involved in this? So have you branded nations or cigars, or where's your brand?
No cigars yet, but in terms of...
Well, Cuba's open now, so you get
Yeah, look, our company is involved in a combination of what we call corporate branding, so yes, businesses like you were talking about before, through to a specialisation in place branding, and that place branding has meant that we have worked in countries, other countries around the world, such as Jamaica and Botswana and currently the Gambia. In West Africa, we've worked in Asia as well.
So the attempt there is to get their reputations either better known or more widely known, or even help them have a reputation because people don't even know where they are.
Yeah, and it depends, Ed, I think, on what you want to be known for. And that's kind of the basic premise of what we're on about here in Double Bay and other parts of Sydney where we've worked as well, because it's not a question of being known, it's what do you want to be known for. And here, this place wanted to be known for a level of sophistication and style, but with some energy.
Wait a minute. Double Bay, double pay. Sophistication comes with that, Greg. Why do you want to get away from that? Most people are trying to get sophisticated.
Sophistication doesn't mean you have to pay double to get it. And that was that big thing. We had to let them know that we've got all the attributes that you really need. We've got a beautiful flat area, we've got greenery, we've got space, we've got parks, we've got prettiness, we've got the harbour right at our doorstep. We had many of the attributes, but we just had this stigma that if you go down there you get ripped off.
Well, Catherine, why would anybody in the City Council care as long as people are paying their rates?
I think that's an attitude that some can take, but I don't think it's the right attitude going forward. So many more people are moving to inner suburbs and into cities, and all the different places are competing with each other. So really, to attract and retain the tenants, the beautiful hotel that we're in today, we need to create a sense of place that they want to come to, just as much as people want to come to the places that they create within that precinct.
Well, that sounds very good, but when companies do this, it costs a whole lot of money, and I think IBM, and they spent millions of dollars to just put up the letters, and a brand is a very ticklish thing. Remember, some athletes did a few wrong things, and their brand was ruined. So isn't this a kind of a tender issue for a city council?
It can be, and I think one of the key things we're trying to do is create a sense of ownership, not just by council. Council can only do certain things, but it needs the cooperation of the businesses, and I think the community does put at risk the fact that anyone can destroy the brand if they do the wrong thing. But you do need to have a central place that starts to communicate the brand and get people to follow what that brand is, so it isn't tarnished or it isn't diluted. So whilst this is, I think you're right, a very tenuous task to have a broad sense of ownership, it still requires an element of coordination, which is the responsibility of the chamber.
So why did you think of this? What gave you this idea to do this branding stuff?
It was definitely through a lot of work we've done with the Future Cities program. We did identify that the hard, tangible work can only do so much. We could create a wonderful gateway from our harbour to the shopping precinct, but actually to bring people in there and want to bring them there needed something a little bit more than that. And it was creating that sense of place.
We needed to put an umbrella that everybody could get
Everybody
under.
could see, and so that people could see some symbolism.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that symbolism, if you see that symbolism, we have plenty of it. The Opera House, the bridge, those are global symbols, right? You couldn't pay for those.
I think I think it's a good way to think of it in what you're saying there, Catherine, is it's like a call to action. So we want to go somewhere. We create a new vision for where we want to go, and the brand in this instance, or the identity or the reputation, is a call to action for people, because brand is about experience. It's about the experience that lives through the people and the landscapes and whatever
I know
else.
some places that don't have very good brands, because every time they're named, there's the police station is there, or there's a motor accident there. In some places, undeservedly. If there's a criminal who commits a crime, they say he's from the X side of town.
Sure.
The fact is that the crime was committed right downtown. The fact where he came from doesn't make any difference, or the race, or whatever. These are all identifiers in television. But let's go through the exercise you guys went through. How did you go about, and I know you led that exercise, what are the steps you guys went through in order to develop a brand here?
Well, do you want me to jump in the sense of,
Please.
I think it was key that first and foremost someone on the ground owned it, which the chamber led, and then it was writing a brief to get someone to do that. We didn't knock on David's door straight away. It was a lot of agonising time, wasn't it, to actually say, what do we want out of this exercise? And writing that brand brief was very, very interesting.
Excellent.
And you remember some of the people who presented to us on the
Vividly.
day, and they were, some of them were very good at, I would call, retail branding. Some were very good at creating, I think one did shopping centres at airports, but that's not place
That's not
branding. No.
We actually, and to Catherine's credit, we had a very, very detailed idea in our mind, and I think our brief was 3 or 4 pages long and covered everything we could think of. And going through the tender,
Yep.
do you not agree?
Yeah, they understood what we were asking for.
All right, so they understood what you're asking for. There's some other elements here. So you've got David on board. Fast forward here, we got David on board. Now, what do you go through to create that brand? You're on site, you find somebody like David. Now, what do you do?
Well, I think if I can
You
jump
go
in
for
at
it.
that point,
Okay.
look, I
You
think
did it.
I think firstly, just reflecting back on the brief that the guys are talking about, the most important thing about a brief is to know what the outcomes are that you want to achieve. So once we're clear on that, then we have I suppose, a process that we work through, which is a place brand modelling process. And the most critical element of that is to set up the right consultative process at the front end that allows a level of ownership coming out
10,
the back
15,
end.
20 people coming together? Or?
Yeah, generally we would reckon it's what we would call a brand council.
Okay.
And it is both a representative group, but more importantly, they are individuals of influence and intelligence who can contribute to the thinking behind the brand. Because
Okay.
our
That's
business,
step one.
yeah,
Set up your group.
exactly, and our business is not about going off into a studio and creating something separately to the community. It's got to be something that's engaged in a very inclusive sense, and that you build something together. And the step 2 is what we call strategy, but in effect, it's what is our story.
Well, step 1. Who are the kind of people involved in that step 1? Greg and
Yeah, there's these two obviously.
We were a
personally
bit
involved.
vocal, I think.
But,
but there's
shouldn't have
the people
spiked.
on the council. There are community members.
Yeah.
Business owners.
Yeah,
Business
business
owners
owners,
and
yeah.
so on.
Property
People,
developers.
and people who've been here a long time and people who've been here short. Correct.
Indeed, and we wanted to have some younger people involved in that, as well as
Like
those
me.
who've been around for a long time, just like you, Ed. Indeed, because what we want is we want to talk about the next generation, the next, the future of the place, not just the heritage and the past. So that process.
So what do you identify in that process?
Well, we identified actually that it was, I think, a real mix of learning from the past as to what we needed to honour and respect and take forward with us, together with some new energy and new excitement.
So what were some of the particular things about Double Bay in that?
Again, going back to what we said before, we talk about what we call urban sophistication. So
Okay.
the urban environment and some sophistication around it. Stylishness is really important.
I better look a little bit better here.
What about European heritage? Because that was
Yeah,
really
which was a-
interesting.
Well, that came out very strongly,
Yeah.
didn't it?
It did,
Yeah.
and it was
Yeah.
kind of contentious, and yet
Yeah.
it wasn't really contentious in that it was part of it is part of the DNA of the place.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Well,
so,
one of the elements of that, as I recall, was one of the first coffee roasting places
Yeah.
was here, and now everyone goes to European coffee in Sydney,
Sure.
Yeah.
and it's based on this. So
Yeah.
it had its origins right here in Double Bay.
and those stories of that history and that heritage are really fundamental to engaging into the future, I think. But then, we want to inject some youthfulness and some life and some colour.
So what were the next steps? So we got the European heritage that comes from the past, a feel of the community from the past, the conversations, the village elements. What else came into that?
Well, I think from our point of view, what we have is a range of building blocks that we put
Okay.
together to construct the overall story, and then sitting at the heart of that, we have what's in some cases called the brand purpose or the brand essence. And for us here, one of the interesting combinations in that was the notion of stylish, but with intimate as well.
Style and intimate. I love it. I love it. Like right here on the couch.
Yeah, so it's sort of like
very intimate.
Well, some of us reflected right behind you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
The intimate style of this
yeah.
community is in that photo.
Yeah, and then we added, so there are like 3 words that ended up at the heart of the brand, if you like, which was stylish, intimate, and refreshing. And
Love it.
And so I think collectively there was this desire to, as I said, respect the heritage and the value in style. It's like exclusivity is not a bad thing, but inclusive exclusivity is a better thing.
Right, so you're stylish, you're European, and so forth. But there's some physical attributes. You're right on the harbour.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a beautiful suburb.
We had this thing of let's put the bay back in Double Bay, so how do we connect again to that physical geographic environment and all those wonderful, it's sort of like almost a vaguely rural feel, in that it's a very leafy area. There's a
village.
Yeah, the village I think is the key thing.
Just like in France or
in its own way.
Italy and so on. But this is the urban village like New York.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so the vision, the words that stood out in that were stylish bayside village. And could other parts of Sydney claim that? They might, but they're not going to be as able to claim it in a sort of a truthful and real sense, I think, as you can.
Well, you're right on the bay. You're right here.
It's completely unique. It's flat. There's trees everywhere. It's pretty.
It's very pretty.
There's no high road.
And it's very close to the CBD, so you can connect it immediately.
11 minutes
to that sort
the
of
ferry
city
to
heart.
the middle of the city.
Well, now we have those words. Now those words have to be articulated in some way. What do you articulate them as? You put up signs around or banners, or how do you get that done?
Well, I suppose this is where I think historically a lot of places and businesses have probably gone wrong, where you sort of say, right, we're going to create a logo and that'll fix the problem. But we do create a logo. That's part of it. So there's a visual identity that is in part a logo and it's in part a typography and so forth. But it's also how you visualise the place that you're in. So it's what is the the photographic style that you want to get across? What colours do you want to dial up and down in this equation? So that's on the visual
side.
side.
Hotel's part of that, isn't
it? It is, yeah, very much so.
The art that's around here, the way it presents itself, the stylishness of this place. People come here who live here to spend the weekend. That's the kind of thing, my wife and I are booking it.
Well, this is one of the legs of the stool to keep the place.
The hotel?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now I've got 3 things. One, you identify kind of what the DNA is of a place. The second, you collect it in some kind of communications vehicle. And then you have markers, like the hotel, the things that will carry this brand, the cinema, things that carry that brand. Because you can't do everything at once. So you have to pick a few targets, get those things identifying with the brand, and then pushing that. Have I got it right?
Yeah, and I think it's a nice way to think about that, Ed, is to describe them as pride marks, actually. So, if you like, the logo itself can be a pride mark, but the physical infrastructure and the people who exist in the place are really how you engender pride, and pride engenders belonging and welcoming and invite.
Well, how do you launch that? I mean, you had 10 or 15 or 20 people, and the pride you're talking about has to be more universal. How'd you launch that? How'd you get that done?
I think the answer to that is that it's almost never ending. You're all constantly trying to communicate and engender that sense of place. And I know a lot of work through the Chamber and with the launch, we can say that there are now banners up or there's some wonderful pavement signage, but unless you actually walk into a shop in the street here and get a Double Bay experience that fits with that brand and continues to do that, then I think the brand doesn't work. We have to keep going and keep.
I think that's very important.
Building on what we've got. We've got a lot of the markers and the tangibles to start delivering the brand, but making it part of everyday's life. is one of the hardest challenges, and I know
Exactly, it's
the
bringing-
Chamber's thinking about a more broad strategy as well.
Well, what
to
were
start
some
doing that.
elements of that broad strategy?
Of bringing the pride back of the customer service, the
Mm-hmm.
experience that a
So you'd be running some customer service workshops?
absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, and the experience of bringing new people. I mean, we now know, for example, there's a lot of cruise ships coming into Sydney. To be able to bring and let people experience it at the same time engenders a little bit more pride and a little bit more excitement from the retailers that are here to think that they can attack new customer bases. So I think that pride probably plays a lot of play.
But I want, because some people will be looking at this and they say, well, we've got a lot of pride in our community. Some of it's misdirected. You've got to get that energy
Gotta
into
be on
some
display.
vehicles and on display. What are some of the key things that you guys have done to make sure that happens?
I'm just thinking one of the things that, and it's almost like an interesting debate between the city and the chamber, is who owns some of that communication. And we've had some discussions in around websites. So
Okay.
the Double
Well,
Bay
social media websites are important.
the Double Bay Chamber's website has now reflected the visual identity that we've got with the brand, and then how you communicate to your businesses. And then you go, well, the residents should also be involved in this. Now, is that something that the city should do, or is it something that the chamber should do? But either way,
But there are some
it's got to be
people in the
it's gotta happen.
community in a meeting I was in who have a neighborhood newspaper.
Yeah.
And that's taking part in the brand and the
Yeah.
brand exercise and communicating. Another thing, events.
Mhm.
Correct.
And these events can wear the
Significant.
brand.
Yeah.
And pretty soon, that brand is so universal that everybody thinks it's theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's our main goal at the moment. We've created this brand, and our main selling point was the fact that it's not my brand, it's not her brand, it's our brand, and the more people that use it, the more quickly it is recognised internationally, nationally, at a legal level. We're getting all sucked into the vortex and heading in that direction. The more people that get on board.
So now I got another factor, adding to my other three. You gotta walk it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Walk it and talk it and live it. So it's not just like a corporation does, their new logo comes out and their little symbol comes out and everybody in the corporation goes to a couple meetings and it's done. Here you gotta get the merchants involved, you gotta get the community residents involved and so on. So communities that wanna get into this have to do it as a whole. It's
Correct.
kind of like teaching swimming,
Yeah.
right? You gotta get to the deep end of the pool, right?
It starts out like herding cats.
Yes. A lot of those don't like to swim. But the idea here is that you can have an identity anyway. You know, cities are gonna have identities anyway. As soon as I say the name of a city, New York, an image comes to your head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If I say Hollywood, you think of movies, right? If I say LA, you think of traffic,
Sure.
right?
Rodeo Drive.
Right, the refinery and so on. And when we went on our study tour, every place we went, Portland and so forth, had an identity for you before you ever got there.
Yes.
And some of these identities were reinforced
Correct.
Yeah.
Or changed.
or changed.
Yeah.
So if you're going to have an identity, you might as well live it, breathe it, work it,
Own it.
own it.
It's the only way. It's the
Or
only way
change
it
it.
works. isn't it?
Yeah.
And what you guys are involved in is changing, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So would you suggest this for other communities?
I think it's a great idea. My experience has been, and it's funny, I go to even another community, whether it's in this country or not, and you do get that sense of place, whether they want that to be the right thing to communicate or not. But I tend to think whether you're in Marrickville, Wollongong, Gosford, if you don't do something like this, you're missing an opportunity. And all the
For
other
people
work
around
that you
from
did.
Australia, those are names of places. Those aren't that dirty words.
Yeah,
So that
from
communicates
from a
something
broader
too,
sense,
right?
Yeah. But it's but you know, even Singapore, you know, so each of those cities have created, and I think proactively created.
Well, Singapore
What
really
their
has
sense
an
of
image.
place has.
You would drop a piece of paper in Singapore, would you?
No.
We all know that, and we don't do it, so the place stays clean because of the image it presents,
Sure.
Yeah.
right? You go to New Orleans, where I work, you might dance down the street
Right.
because other people are doing it. You feel comfortable in that environment.
Yeah.
So the bottom line here is make sure you have an identity.
Absolutely.
and that you communicate it well.
And that it's the right identity to achieve the outcomes that you want.
Protect your city's image with a good brand. We'll protect ours by being with you again. Bye, so long, hasta la vista,